Welcome to the Confidence Through Health podcast. My name is Jerry Snyder. As a health, wellness, and sports performance coach, my goal each week is to bring you experts to help you take control of your health and build your self-confidence. Thanks for including me today on your journey to better health. I'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, All In Health and Wellness. If you're looking for a health coach, you're looking for a sports performance coach, you're looking for nutrition guidance, like for instance, a meal by meal plan that will help you understand how to eat. It will teach you how to eat, and it will give your body, your cells, the proper nutrition to feel great and be able to perform at your best, not just physically, but also emotionally and mentally. If you're looking for those things, you're looking for the key to improve your sports performance, both from a nutrition standpoint and an exercise physical standpoint and a mental standpoint as you approach your athletic event. All In Health and Wellness is able to help in these areas. Go to allinhealthandwellness.com and you'll find the contact information for how to get in touch with them and get started on the plan that will improve your life. Well, thank you, Dr. J, for being a guest on the Confidence Through Health podcast.
Great. Thanks for having me, Jerry.
So, as we talked a little bit before we started recording, your background is as a chiropractor, but you've moved over into some of the sleep habits of people and trying to help people get better sleep, which is for anybody, I think well, one that's like over 40, you sort of realize it, maybe even over 25, you sort of realize how important sleep starts becoming and how much of a problem it is. But especially for people that are health conscious, you start to see how important sleep is to your overall health. So, but tell us a little bit first, but like getting into chiropractic, like why that modality of wanting to help people with their health, why was that important to you?
My background was in psychology from a Tibetan Buddhist college in Colorado, where I minored in yoga.
Oh, wow.
And then from there, I moved to an ashram in India and studied yoga even more deeply. My teacher there, Swami Gitananda, he was also a medical doctor,
Mhm.
and that inspired me to go into the healthcare arena. However, for me, wasn't a great fit in terms of writing prescriptions all day long. That just
Right.
didn't feel like a good fit for me. So when I found out about chiropractic care, which was actually when I got back from India, I loved the concept that I could just use my hands and a couple adjusting tools and help people naturally address their back and their neck issues.
Right. And that's a big piece of obviously like having a healthy body, right? Is having the correct nervous system connections and the correct bone structure through the spine, that everything's working properly. Because if it's not, that that that's just the start of, dis-ease, whether it shows up as a chronic disease or something that's more of what people think of as, cancer or issues like that, that just start because the body's not properly like healing itself and feeling and understanding what's going on, correct?
Yes, there are different philosophies on this. I actually have a more mechanistic approach where essentially what I do as a chiropractor is I address joint fixations in the spine and the pelvis, and that directly translates into neck and back issues, whether it be pain or tightness. Um, but as you know, when you're in back pain, when your back hurts, it does affect every aspect of your life.
Yeah.
And then, essentially, I wanted to also look at what causes the joints to lock up in the first place. And that gets into mechanical stress, emotional stress, chemical stress.
Mhm.
And so you start looking at other aspects of people's lives when you're trying to do this holistically.
Yeah. Well, and then you start then sleep does become something that I would assume people start talking about is, I didn't get good sleep because, I had this going on or that going on that kept me up. And then the lack of proper sleep causes for most people tossing and turning. You're trying to find that position that you'd think is going to be the perfect position to fall asleep, right? But sometimes that causes, okay, well, now I wake up and my neck's in pain, or I've got that crick, or my hips are off. And so it is this. until we find that proper solution, like it can be a almost a snowball, but then also like around in a circle. It just keeps going, like back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, trying to find out like how is the proper fit. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I had an intuition. I opened my practice 20 years ago, and I included on the history form, how do you sleep? Your back, your
Mhm.
sides, your stomach. And I was curious, my patients, how they were sleeping. And what I learned is that most people, about two-thirds of us, shift between our sides and our back at night.
Mhm.
And now it becomes a situation where, well, if the spine isn't in a neutrally straight position while we're sleeping, the joints inherently are going to be stressed.
Mhm.
And this is significant, really, particularly during sleep, because during the day, if you're sitting in a, cross-legged position, within 2 minutes or whatever it is, your body will tell your brain, tissues are being stressed, and then your
Mhm.
brain will readjust your body to get out of that stressed position. However, at night, when we're in REM sleep, when we're dreaming, it turns out we're paralyzed from the neck down
Mhm.
during that phase of sleep. So while those messages might be sent from the body to the brain can't respond accordingly. And REM sleep starts out at about 10, 15 minutes during the first session of the night, but it comes around during every sleep cycle and progressively gets a little bit longer. So the last period of REM sleep could be 50, 60 minutes that we've been in this kind of potentially wonky position.
Yeah.
And then we get up and we wonder why we feel like we got hit by a truck.
Mhm.
And so this was a direct link to trying to understand what is causing the back and neck issues that my patients are experiencing and
Yeah.
what could be done about it. And as it
Right.
turns out, it's very difficult to do something about it, actually,
Yeah.
because we're asleep.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, and that's one of the things I think that people like understanding that piece of the length of sleep that you need to actually get into the restorative and repairing part of REM sleep. So to go from a like people that say like, oh, I can exist on 3 hours of sleep a night or 5 hours of sleep a night, and it's like you may be able to exist, but you're not going to thrive from a holistic health standpoint, right?
Yeah, there's a what's called short sleep syndrome that about 1 to I think 3% of the public has a genetic alteration, if you will, that allows them to efficiently sleep 4, 5, 6 hours a night, and they get as much restoration as the rest of us get from 7 to 9 hours. But you're absolutely right. 97% of us are in the category where we really need 7 to 9 hours of sleep at
Yeah.
night to get the physical restoration during non-REM sleep, and then the emotional and psychological restoration during REM sleep.
Right. And so if we're not getting that and we're tossing and turning and not in the correct position, it's almost like we're making this pile of unhealthy habits get stronger and stronger and stronger. And sometimes though it's out of necessity, whether it's okay, I'm working two jobs or life is tough. New moms, babies are up all the time. Like there's parts of life where it's okay, this is just the season I'm in. But to set that up as a lifelong habit really, I mean, and effectively it shortens our life.
Yes, absolutely. So when we're sleep deprived on a chronic basis, we are throwing our whole nervous system into what's called the sympathetic dominant state, where we're in this fight or flight state constantly. And there's just a litany, literally every system in the body is affected by this. The heart is working harder when it should be resting. The immune system's not doing what it's supposed to be doing. The gut isn't producing the right type of microbiome. We're pumping out more hormones that prompt eating
Mhm.
uh, simple sugar foods and we just don't get ever satiated. So
Yeah.
there's just all this sequela to this sleep deprived state. And as a pertains to just what I do as a chiropractor, it also lowers our pain threshold. So
Mm,
what would be an 8 out of 10 pain, or I should say a 4 out of 10 pain normally, if you're sleep deprived, that could feel like a 7 or 8 out of 10. So there's a
yeah,
lot of negative consequences.
yeah. Oh, and I hadn't heard that one before, but I mean, that sort of makes sense because you're in that heightened state, so everything's more alert.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so it can, and not just from a pain standpoint, but I would imagine from emotional, like emotions are obviously higher and triggered quicker.
Yeah.
You're not able to process through things, and then of course that just makes life more difficult when we're
Yes.
not able to do those things.
Well, yeah, the first half of the night we're really more in non-REM sleep
Mhm.
proportionally, and that is where a lot of the physical restoration occurs. I mean, 85% of growth hormone is distributed throughout the body
Mhm.
during this deep, slow wave sleep. It's the second half of the night, which is more REM sleep dominated, where we're doing a lot of emotional processing, we're processing memories. And so especially, we're sleeping 5, 6, 7 hours or 5 or 6 hours a night. It's the second half of the night where REM sleep is really compromised. And it's been proven depression and anxiety are directly linked to this type of thing.
Oh,
Mhm.
wow. So to get into the correct position, you mentioned before about being the spine being in the correct alignment when we sleep. And for anybody that is a parent, that we know that you've heard, well, no, you put your babies on their back. No, you put your babies on the front. Like there's every couple of years there's a different change in like how you're supposed to start the habit of sleep,
Yes.
right? Like
Yes.
what is the best position to be in?
That's a great question. So I have a personal theory about this. I believe that I've never read this anywhere, but just in talking to thousands of people about their
Mhm.
sleep position and analyzing this, when we're on our back, it's almost like our low back is in a standing type of position. We're
Mhm.
extended out straight. But
Mhm.
then when we're on our sides, we're kind of curled up, more like we're seated.
Mhm.
And so my theory is that just like during the day, we wouldn't want to be standing or sitting too long. Our low back kind of cues us. I think the same thing happens at night. And
Mhm.
I think that is why we just naturally go between this side and back sleeping position. Now, the problem is that in the neck, you only need about an inch of support underneath your head on your back,
Mhm.
but then you need close to 4 or 5 inches of support on your side for your
Mhm.
head. So
Mhm.
there's an issue with pillows because 99% of pillows are one level
Yeah.
and it just doesn't work. For the low back, when we're on our back, especially if you have any type of back issues, ideally you want a pillow underneath your knees, which is
Mhm.
going to decompress your low back. And then when you're on your side, ideally, we want a pillow between our knees with space about 3 inches or so. And ideally, our legs, our femur bones are parallel to each other because
Mhm.
otherwise, you have this torquing of the pelvis,
Mhm.
which is what I probably treat 80% of the time in my office, what are called
Yeah.
the sacroiliac joints.
Mhm.
So the challenge is, quite honestly, is that we flip and fold while we're asleep and there really isn't orthopedic devices that are suited to supporting the system the way it needs to be supported, despite the mattress, quite
Right.
honestly.
Right. And yeah, and that doesn't get into, mattress firmness, pillow firmness, and like all that kind of that's just just looking at the actual dimensions of what you need. And it totally makes sense and I've been in that position where it's like, okay, I'm on my side and like, oh, my hip starts to hurt. Before I actually fall asleep, and I could feel it. I was like, oh, that hurts. And like, okay, I got to put something in between my knees to alleviate that because, okay, this is the position I want to be in. I'm comfortable. I'm ready to go to sleep. And like, oh, why am I in pain? You know?
Yeah,
And so I can just imagine if I didn't do that and fallen asleep, what that's going to trigger when I wake up if I stay in that position for too long.
absolutely.
And
Yeah,
and so that's like, so looking at it from a pillow standpoint, from like, is it then a matter of like we need different pillows because we're going to flop around. And so we need to have something that we can flop to or change based on how we're starting our night.
Well, this gets into the self-promotion a little bit.
Sure, that's
I
fine.
okay, so I many years ago I discovered that there was a gap in the pillow marketplace.
Yeah.
Um, there really, like I said, 99% of pillows are one level.
Mhm.
And so if you're like two-thirds of us shifting between the back and the side sleeping, you need a pillow with two different support systems.
Right.
So, about 14 years ago, I invented a pillow that is for back sleeping. There's a head cradle in the center that your head sits in, and there's a neck support that goes under your neck. And then the sides of the pillow are much higher so that when you roll to your sides, you get the correct port support in that direction. So this was the initial design. It was in the market for a couple years, and now I just redesigned it. Now it's made of organic latex, and we're going to be launching this summer formally. But I did this, and I've gone through these contortions because looking out at the pillow market, there's a reason that people who have a neck problems keep buying pillows and keep being dissatisfied because they're just not scientifically designed.
Yeah. And and this doesn't even take into account like issues when you said neck problems, like issues that come up from whiplash or car accidents or any of those types of things that are more of an acute issue that you've got to try and work through. That, it's just the chronic long term, I'm sleeping in the wrong position. And so that there's so many different facets of what could be changed in a moment's notice to your body and your sleep positions. And if you don't address those things when they happen, then I would assume the muscles are going to try to adjust as best they can and put your body in a contortion that may or may not be what's actually best for you.
Absolutely. I've always likened this with patients, explaining it as kind of like a bucket that fills up with drops and drops of water. And so if you've had a car accident, consider that as being a bunch of drops of water.
Mhm.
And then you're looking down at your phone, texting all day, and that's a
Mhm.
bunch of drops. Now you add upon that sleeping in the wrong position, and that is when the drops now start overflowing and you
Mhm.
start to become symptomatic versus someone who's never had any trauma, really never had any chronic neck problems. They tend to get away with sleeping in weird positions and generally are
Mhm.
okay. Just like when we were kids, you could just sleep in any which way and it didn't bother you. So
Right.
it's really more of a cumulative type of thing that I found with people that if they've had a history of back and neck problems, position becomes much more important.
And so that addresses some of the like, okay, well, I was on a plane this past week, right? And so like trying to sleep on a plane is awkward, and I've got the neck pillow and then I put it over on the side so I can put it up against the window and try and, find that position and and ultimately never found like, I mean, it was little power naps more than anything because it was like, okay, I'm out of position. I kept waking myself up and realizing that that's obviously not ideal. And if we're doing that when we sleep, if we're having those constant wake ups, we're disrupting that cycle. If that wake up is for too long, right? Like waking up for a few seconds and going back to sleep is pretty normal,
Mhm.
but waking up for 30 minutes or an hour in the middle of the night is causing a disruptive behavior for our sleep cycles, right?
Absolutely. If you have a chronic, whether it's a back or a neck, or we can carry this over to something like sleep apnea, where you're having disrupted breathing. All of these types of situations cause what we call fragmented sleep.
Mhm.
So you're never getting into that deep, either state, what we call slow wave sleep, which is very restorative. That's when a lot of the growth hormone is being pumped out in the system and a lot of the repair of the tissues occurring, or during REM sleep during the second half of the night. So in either case, our sleep in that disrupted, fragmented state. And that's why we wake up. We could be in bed for 7, 8, 9 hours and we feel exhausted
Mhm.
when we get up because it was never a good, deep quality sleep, like you suggest.
Yeah. So are there things that we can do before we, we we fall asleep, whether it's before we even get in bed or when we're in bed, like are there things that we can do to sort of prompt our body to be in the proper sleep state as we sleep? Since you mentioned like we're paralyzed from the neck down, like it's not like we can fix it while we're in REM sleep.
Yeah. Yeah, from a positional standpoint, it's pretty difficult. I mean, this is why I invented a sleeping pillow because it just naturally, as you roll to different positions, you just end up with a neutral spine.
Mhm,
Currently, what's in the marketplace is just simply not designed properly. So it's pretty tough, but to your point of just let's just kind of broaden this out a little bit and talk about insomnia and falling
mhm,
asleep in general, which
mhm.
is a huge problem in
Yeah,
our society right now. So I think that's definitely a topic that we can go into and
yeah.
address a little bit more closely because it's such an issue around this country and around the world, quite frankly. The biggest, let's just start with a couple of just environmental components, and that would be your noise level. We
Mhm,
want either silence or we need some type of white noise machine.
mhm,
Light is very important because if we're exposed to light right before we go to bed, that cues the brain to suppress melatonin
mhm,
production. Melatonin is what helps us fall asleep. So it's very important that as we're falling, that last hour, particularly before sleep, that we don't expose ourselves to any bright lights. And the final environmental component would be temperature. You
mhm.
want your room to be somewhere between 65 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit, which might seem a little cold to some people, but when the body goes to sleep, it does the core temperature drops. And
Mhm,
so we want the ambient temperature in the room to match that
mhm.
temperature in our bodies. That's going to be most helpful. If it's 70, 72 degrees, this is going to be disruptive to our sleep.
Um, and I think anybody that has tried to sleep when it's really hot outside and there's no air conditioning can sort of, understand that because you wake up often because you're sweating, you're trying to cool off, you're trying to find that because your body's just saying like this isn't comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a huge factor.
Mhm,
And, another big factor is obviously just the mind and the body winding down
mhm,
before bed. So, one of the things that we want to recommend is well, one thing is the TV and devices.
mhm,
These will emit what's called blue light. And blue light, once again, suppresses that melatonin level. So we want to really make sure that we kind of try to, if you have any problem sleeping, falling asleep, particularly exposing yourself to very little of this blue light right before bed.
right.
Another thing that can be very helpful is doing some gentle stretching, doing some yoga. And I recommend breath work is just
Mhm,
incredible for
yeah.
slowing down the system. The breath work that I teach to my patients is an in breath of 3 beats and an out breath of 6 beats.
Mhm,
And that throws the body into this parasympathetic or this rest and digest
mhm,
response.
mhm,
And another really good pragmatic solution is taking a shower before bed.
mhm,
When you get out of the shower, the body will cool down a little bit, which matches this core temperature drop. So that can be really very helpful. And one last thing I will suggest is going to sleep and waking up around the same time every day, getting
mhm,
that
mhm.
clock aligned with the circadian rhythm clock, with the
Yeah,
clock of the earth is very,
yeah,
very helpful for people.
yeah. Well, and that's one of the things that I trigger is it for when we go camp, for anybody who has gone camping, you go camping, maybe you do a campfire, you're sitting out, you're roasting marshmallows, whatever, you're watching the sunset, sun goes down, you start to get cold, you start to like even when I was, in my early 20s, it was never like, okay, now let's go party because it's only 8 o'clock. Let's like go, when if I was in my urban setting, it'd be okay, we're gonna go, to the club till 2 o'clock in the morning or whatever. And it's like,
Mhm.
no, it's like it's 8:45 and I'm ready to go to sleep,
Yeah.
because you're outside and you're following, like you said, the Earth's rhythm of, nope, it's time to go to bed.
Well, it's fascinating. Humankind like you suggest, used to fall asleep when it got dark and wake
Mhm.
up when it got light. And it's fascinating because that is, especially during certain seasons, that could be a very long window of
Mm,
time.
right.
So many cultures had what they called segmented sleep. So they'd go to sleep as a community, and then they would wake up in the middle of the night and be up for about 2 hours as a community, and then they'd go back to sleep for the second half of sleep.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so this is something that, humankind has addressed just naturally through the years.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's really important to try to be aware. I think dimming lights is one of the things
Mhm.
that I try to do to address this in the home. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and it's you address the devices, and I've heard that for several years now of making sure that you're away from them, and that they're not. You don't store it right on your bedside table. I mean, there's very few people that are going to have that emergency phone call in the middle of the night. They got to get up and go do something.
Yes.
Most of us, while we might think it's an emergency and we want to know right away because we're in that society now of like instant notifications, most of us can wait until 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, like after we've slept and everything. And so like putting that device away, because in that moment that you do wake up and you're like, oh, I'm awake. Okay, can I go back to sleep? Maybe. Oh, wait, I grab my phone and look and see if there's anything. And that triggers so many things in our mind that
Yes.
starts racing. And all of a sudden, now we're up for 3 hours and maybe go to sleep for another hour right before you wake up. And you wake up and your day's just not set up well because your sleep is just horrible.
Yeah. Yeah, we're off to the races. And
Mhm.
so some people will consciously set their phones for the entire family in another room where it's just off limits.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that's a great idea. But it's difficult because we are all so immediate gratification. Number
Mhm.
one, we want to stay abreast of everything that's happening in the world. And
Mhm.
this can be challenging. But it's certainly, if you're having sleep issues, this is definitely something to help address this. And they do make actually blue light protectors that you can
Mhm.
attach to the phone as well. So that's another
Yeah,
way of trying to limit that exposure.
right. And so if somebody's having problems with sleep, whether it's they're waking up and they consistently have body aches because they're positioning or insomnia issues or just not being able to sleep through the night issues, how 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 long should they let that go before they seek some sort of medical advice?
Now, I think that's a very good question. I don't know if medicine has an official answer
Right.
to that or not, but I do think that if once again you're waking up and you've spent 8 hours in bed and you're tired and you're just chronically tired, this is a real indicator that you should definitely go and get professional attention.
Mhm.
And the gold standard to address this is what's called CBTI, cognitive behavioral therapy,
Mhm.
with a specific focus on insomnia, where they will work on the thoughts, but they'll also work on the environment where you basically only go and lie in that bed for sleep. It becomes a
Mhm.
sleep place only. And then the other issue is not forcing yourself to go to bed at a certain time, waiting for that sleep pressure to build up.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
they have those are the three main areas of CBTI, which has been proven to be very successful. But unfortunately, some of us get to the point where melatonin supplements or, different types of herbal teas, these are all great ideas, but some of us do reach a state where we do need some type of medication support,
Mhm.
at least in the short term, to get us back on track until we can
Right.
get these other issues addressed.
Right.
Yeah, but I mean, just in terms of more pragmatic solutions, alcohol is a big one that many of us will think is helping us in
Mhm.
terms of it has this sedative effect. But unfortunately, it may actually help us fall asleep, but once the alcohol is fully metabolized in the body, we tend to wake up,
Mhm.
and then falling back to sleep can be very difficult. And so alcohol is a real problem in terms of using that as a solution.
Mhm.
Uh, Another thing that we want to try to, in terms of environmental factors, we want to try to avoid eating fatty foods, spicy foods, anything really heavy 2, 3 hours before bed.
Mhm.
Of course, caffeine is something that really, the half-life of caffeine is 4 to 6 hours. So we
Right.
don't want to have caffeine probably past 3, 4 in the afternoon. Exercise is very important.
Mhm.
In terms of people who exercise generally do sleep much better. But once again, too intensive exercise too close to bed can be activating. So we want to
Right.
make sure that we don't do that. But these are all natural solutions that we can approach to try to get better sleep at night.
Yeah. Um, well, and like you said, the exercise thing, because I'm a runner, and there's times where it's like, okay, well, I because of my schedule or maybe the temperature outside, I don't get to run until 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night. Sometimes, especially I'm in Texas in the summer. Sometimes it's like you don't want to run until 8:30, 9 o'clock at night if you miss the morning run because it's so hot.
Yeah.
And what I found for myself is I sleep worse on days when I do that and I don't drink enough. Like I can
Mm,
connect the dots of like my body wakes up because I'm cramping or I'm feeling the dehydration because I, had a lot of sweat movements and a lot of exercise right before, an hour or so before bed, and I didn't rehydrate. And so my body goes, because when we're asleep, we're not hydrating. You're right, you're in a state of continuing to dehydrate until you wake up and drink something. And so yeah, that's another key piece I think for people that do exercise late, like making sure that you're hydrating because that you don't want that to be the reason you wake up simply because you didn't drink enough water.
100%. Yeah, that's a really big one. And like you said, we're all on these busy schedules these days. So evening workouts can be, now, I mean, if it's a more moderate type of working out, maybe going
Mhm.
for a walk after dinner, that's one thing. So we need
Yeah,
to delineate between these two
right,
things. Yeah.
right. Yep. Yeah, because a lot of times my runs are 5, 6, even up to 10 miles. And so yeah, that's a big difference from your casual walk around the block after your meal, which is also a very huge beneficial thing for your health, right?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. Um, yeah, I just recently wrote a book that hopefully we're going to get published in the next little bit, but it is discussing how there's essentially 5 pillars of health that
mhm.
each of these pillars can throw us into this fight or flight or rest and digest response. And in terms of exercise, there's something to be said for moderate
Mhm.
exercising. It adds just such huge beneficial effects. And to your point, walking in particular, that's my main form of cardio as I
Mhm.
walk. I love to walk, especially hiking in the woods. I
Mhm.
find to be very healthy,
Yeah,
spiritually, emotionally. But as a former runner my whole life, I appreciate the love of running, and too. The
yeah,
endorphin high is just,
yep,
it's an incredible feeling.
yep. And so, one of the things I think about is like relationships and some of us have maybe heard the thought process of, don't go to bed when you're upset with somebody else. Like have that, especially if it's your spouse or someone who's close within the family group of like, okay, having that conversation but I've also heard from other people that are like, nope, like put a pause to it. Your sleep's important. Go to bed, wake up with a fresh mind when you're not as emotionally energized about it, and then have the conversation, you know? And
Mm.
and so I've heard both sides of it. Like there's not really when it comes to the emotional side of going to sleep, there's not really a one way works best for everybody, right?
No, I don't think there really is. I mean, my mom, ever since I was a kid, told me don't go to bed angry,
Hmm.
and she's been married for over 60 years. So I'm gonna heed her advice on this
Right.
one.
Yeah.
However, sleep deprivation has been shown to be really destructive to marriages.
Hmm.
It really takes a toll, and this kind of gets into another interesting arena, which is separate bedrooms.
Hmm.
which has become a much more prominent idea in our culture. I
Yeah.
think traditionally we judge this as being, there's a problem with the marriage because you're
Right.
sleeping in separate bedrooms. However, sleep is so precious, and particularly if one partner is a light sleeper and the other happens to be a snorer,
Hmm.
this can really create tension in a
Yeah.
relationship. So yeah, there's a lot of schools of thought on this.
Yeah. Well, and my wife and I, we have a king size bed, and we have our own sides, of course, like I think most couples do, right? Like you have your side of the bed. And when we travel and stay in a hotel, and it's, we wind up in two queens because we've got our kids in the room, and and we're like, oh my gosh, this is so close. Like you're so close to me. Like I need my right. And it's like, so it's, I totally get, and I think she would say the same thing. Is like, it's not that we don't love each other. It's not that we don't want to be close, and we have our intimate moments, of course. But it's like, yeah, that sleep piece is so crucial. And if you're a couple that loves to connect and can sleep cuddled up and all that kind of stuff, like that's great too. But there are definitely it's not, it doesn't make you weird because okay, I want to sleep by myself on my own when I'm really going for sleep.
Absolutely. And if your partner's sleep is suffering because they can't get a good night's sleep because you're snoring or moving and waking them up all the time, this is going to translate unfortunately into reduced more anxiety and just reduced tolerance for other people's opinion, all the things that go
Yeah.
along with being sleep deprived emotionally. So it can really have a detrimental effect on relationships.
And so for that person who is, you've mentioned sleep deprived several times, and when I wrote my book several years ago, one of the things I found in research about it was, which I mean, I sort of knew this was there, but like the amount of it like shocked me that by the average American, by the time we hit 40, it was like nearly a 2 year level of sleep deprivation, which
Yeah.
you go, okay, well, wait a minute. Okay, well, yeah, you go through high school, you probably don't sleep as great as you should. College, you definitely probably don't sleep as great as you should because whether you're having fun or you're late night studying, and then, a lot of us quickly go into marriage, parenthood in the 20s and 30s, which disrupts sleep completely. And so by the time you get to 40, yeah, it can add up quickly. There's not really a trick though to get that back, is there?
No, unfortunately, sleep is not like a bank account where we can,
Yeah.
particularly many of us during the week, we're going in a million directions, and then the weekend comes and we feel like we can kind of make up for the sleep that we lost during the week.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, the body doesn't work that way.
Mhm.
So, yeah, it's a really a hard thing to prioritize in our busy lives. But to be clear, America is on average getting I think the number is right around 6.5 hours of sleep,
Mhm.
which is below that 7 hour threshold. Depending on your age as an adult, we should be
Right.
getting somewhere between 7 and 9 hours.
Mhm.
And I can't quote all the numbers, but even after 1, 2, 3 nights of being sleep deprived, the body starts reacting in a very negative fashion.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and I've heard about how much disease and disease factors that can start showing up just after 3 days of not getting the proper amount of sleep. And it doesn't mean that you've got that disease. It's just that those factors start to show in your blood work or in the way your body works. And to me, that just emphasizes how important sleep is. Missing a day is not the end of the world as far as, you've got something big going on or you're stressed about a presentation and so you can't sleep through the night because you're thinking about it all the time. Like one off here or there is not the end of the day. It's sort of like, if you're trying to eat healthy, having junk food once a month is not going to be, it's not going to derail your health. It's the every day, constantly that stockpiles it that that becomes very difficult to overcome.
100%. And when we look at those classic three pillars of health, how we eat, how we move, and how we sleep, the sleep piece really touches into those other areas. Because when we're sleep deprived, the next day exercising is just really difficult. And having the energy and the attention to cook a proper meal for ourselves, we start snacking and stuff, all these, negative consequences from the sleep deprivation. So, yeah, I've become so much more aware of this as I've studied in terms of these orthopedic products that I'm working on, that sleep is the kingpin of health. It really
Yeah.
is the biggest lifestyle habit that we need to probably take more seriously, because in our society, there's almost this, pride in the fact that I don't need as much sleep, or
Right.
everyone's proud that they slept less, but in fact, there's all sorts of, like you said, health consequences that are happening without us even realizing it.
Yeah. So for somebody who is curious about the getting in touch with you, finding out more information, what's the best way to follow you and learn about the things that are coming out that you're working on?
Well, right now we have a website. It's www.drjspillows.com. That's Dr.
Cool.
J's Pillows. I'm not a social media guy yet, but
Okay.
we are going to be launching more social media videos, and I plan on doing a lot of educational pieces and hopefully
Cool.
building a sleep community in the future.
Awesome. Awesome. And we didn't really even touch on, which I fully agree with, is the breath work routines and other things of because it you can calm, like whether it's meditation or whatever you want to call that practice for you of calming and getting away from everything in how much like the monks are showing the benefits from a lifestyle standpoint, right? Of just how peaceful it can be and how joyful life can be when you realize that you've calmed everything in your life down. And so taking those moments, I would assume if you take those moments during the day, it improves your sleep quality when you go to sleep at night because you've already done some of that work when you're awake, right?
Absolutely. I mean, when I went to India, this is 27 years ago now. I think most around me thought I was pretty crazy at the time. They had
Sure.
no idea why I was going. And when I came back, people would ask, "What did you learn over there?" And I think the most powerful thing I learned was how to breathe.
Mhm.
And we call it pranayama. It's energy control. But just that one technique that I mentioned, where you're breathing in 3 beats and breathing out 6 beats, I use this throughout the day. And it just, anytime you get into this tense mode, whatever life presents, I go back to that breath, and it just
Mhm.
naturally throws you right into the rest and digest response.
Mhm.
And so you start to become in a habit of doing that.
Yeah.
And so when you starting to fall asleep at night and are having that ruminating mind, to me, that is the best way to just kind of let your body release and relax.
Yeah. Because it's really hard. I know a lot of people have tried it. I know I've tried it at times to have your mind racing on all the different things that are going on, whether it was conversations you had during the day or things you've got for the next day that you don't want to forget. Your mind's racing on all those things, and you're trying to tell yourself, "Can you just calm down so I can go to sleep?" Like it's really hard to make yourself do that, right?
It is. Yeah, I recommend with patients, I like to have them try to sit and do some writing before
Mhm.
bed. Just write it all out, get it
Yeah.
out as much as you can. And that just
Yeah.
kind of empties it. So
Yeah.
just enough so that you can, try to slow that mind down.
Mhm.
And that's where I also highly recommend a meditation practice, because the essence of a meditation practice will help you let go of
Yeah.
thoughts,
Yeah.
let go, and that's a muscle that we can build
Right.
up. We have that ability with time and practice.
Yeah. And so it's not so much trying to like corral the things and like put them in an order or do all the like keep busy. It's a matter of like, okay, understanding here's my priority, move everything around, focus on something else that I know is going to work to get me to where I want to be. And I agree with you when you have those things that you're like, I don't want to forget, like have that pad of pencil next to your bed and write it down so you can put the pencil down and go, now I can go to sleep because I don't have to worry about it. I'll wake up, I'll see it in the morning. I won't forget it.
Absolutely. Just we
Yeah.
call it just a brain dump. Just
Yeah.
dump it so that you can, have that a period because we time is so precious. We don't want to sit there ruminating for an hour before
Right.
we actually fall asleep. So all of these methods will, help expedite falling asleep.
Yep. Well, Dr. J, I want to thank you so much. This has been hugely beneficial. You've presented some great information that I know is going to help people. Um, and I applaud you for going at it the way you're going at it because it's looking at it from what is actually going to help people and not as what is just going to be a band-aid to get rid of some symptoms, but not really fix the lingering problem that's going on when people sleep in the wrong posture or unable to get the proper sleep.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah.
so
Thank you. I
thank you so much for
appreciate
being
it.
a guest.
All right. Thanks for having me. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for checking out the Confidence Through Health podcast. Please subscribe, post a review, share this episode with those you love who need a little extra help with their health journey. Visit allinhealthandwellness.com to learn more about the coaching programs that I provide. All episodes are produced by the Social Media Cowboys, your source for all online marketing needs. Go to socialmediacowboys.com for more information.